An emo rockstar deity has his toys taken from him, so he goes on a quest to retrieve it. Neil Gaiman's The Sandman has been highly anticipated for quite a while, and it's now arrived on Netflix. So does it live up to the hype? There's another world that waits for us all as we close our eyes and sleep. A place called the Dreaming, where the Sandman, master of dreams, gives shape to all our deepest fears and fantasies. But when Dream is unexpectedly captured and held prisoner for a century, his absence sets off a series of events that will change both the dreaming and waking worlds forever. I know this has been on a lot of people's anticipated list, but I also know there's been some trepidation on what the final product will be, since this is based on a wildly popular graphic novel series. Now, I'm going to stay away from a lot of the specifics of the plot because they contain spoilers, but there's still plenty to discuss that's not going to ruin the storyline. Tom Sturridge stars as Dream, or the Sandman, and he's the one responsible for our dreams and nightmares. Now, he's captured by humans and imprisoned, and in the process, his tools for wrangling the dream world, they're stolen, forcing him to seek them out. Now, Dream looks like a goth rock star as he wears solid black, has a haircut that's a mix of punk and emo, and has very pale skin. Now, he drew me into the character with the quietness of his movements and the deep whisper of his voice. At one point, too, Dream looks exactly like Richmond from the IT Crowd. And because Dream is a bit subdued and dour, but with a great deal of bottled emotion, the similarities go way beyond looks. Now, I've not read any of the source material, so my review is going to be solely based on the Netflix production that we can all watch. Now, I don't know what has been changed, omitted, replicated exactly, but again, I'm only reviewing the series, not the graphic novels. But it also needs to be pointed out that Neil Gaiman, the creator of The Sandman, was heavily involved in this production. So if there are things that don't stick to the source, he already knew about them and probably even helped in figuring out the best way to represent this on the screen. Alright, so I gotta address something right off the bat for this. The technical aspect has a look to it that made me twitch throughout the entire series. And maybe this is just a quirk of the screening versions, but everything is just slightly squashed, which then elongates everything on the screen. It's not so much that people are freakishly thin and tall, but it's enough to be noticeable and distracting. And I can see this being a style when it comes to Dream and his domain, where the slight stretched feeling adds a bit of surrealism to the scenes, making them more dreamlike. But this happens everywhere, even when Dream isn't present, making this look less like a choice and more of an error. Now, maybe it won't bother you, but I couldn't ignore how it was tweaking me out. And maybe this all will be resolved in the final product that's released that everybody else gets to see. But if not, just be aware that this could be something that tweaks you out a bit. Now, the set and costume designs are spectacular. The worlds, especially those that aren't of Earth, like maybe the Dreaming, they are wonderfully crafted. And regardless if they're luxurious and shiny or decrepit and dirty, they look great. There's also a lot of CGI or even background painting that is shown, and I think it builds out the scenes nicely. Now, not all of the CGI was awesomely executed, though. At least in the screening version. Most of it was great to view, but there were bits here and there, especially at the end of the series, that looked more like Sharknado than Endgame. This is 10 episodes, and most of them are between 45 and 55 minutes. But for some reason, the second episode is much shorter. It's less than 40 minutes. Now, the whole story feels a little like Doctor Who, where our main character bounces around time and space, sometimes working with a character and sometimes not, while then we have an overarching narrative that's taking place. And just like within that show, The Sandman plays with many different genres along the way, which helps to keep us on our toes with the storytelling. But they all weave together really well. Sometimes an episode could feel a bit disjointed from another, but that's typically is more because the arc is changing or focusing on a different area of the story. But I really enjoyed the variety within the genres, especially because it kept the show a surprise each time. One episode delved into the horror genre, another felt like a historical drama, and even more felt like fantasy. Now, one episode had a segment that felt exactly like the Wizard's Duel in The Sword and the Stone. Now, I love that movie, so it didn't bother me, but I did chuckle to myself as it was just going on because of all the similarities. Now, there were 3 episodes in particular that really stood out to me as excellent. And that's not to say that the others were bad. Just these 3 really resonated with me most. And maybe it also says something about me and my psyche. Those episodes were 24/7, The Sound of Her Wings, and Collectors, which once you see them, you'll understand what I mean. But I'd be curious to know what episodes clicked with you the most. With so many episodes and such a sweeping story that spans time and realms, there are a lot of characters that we get to meet along the way. Now, some are very intriguing, others are devious or cunning, and still others are a bit frightening. The actors portray them really well. But unfortunately, with all the characters that we do get to meet, there are some that just feel wasted or underutilized in this first season, like Johanna Constantine, Cain and Abel, Lucifer Morningstar, Despair, and Desire. Now, I was very intrigued by who they are and what they represent, but they're here and then gone. And maybe we'll get to see more of these characters as the series goes along, since this first season only encompasses the first 2 graphic novels. We even begin to get a little development on these players too, but they're just not very present within the overall narrative. I do like, though, how some of our main characters get a great deal of background and development. Now, I didn't know who any of these people were at the beginning, but as we went along, I grew to know some of them really well. And this allowed me to connect with some, which then helped greatly in keeping me engaged in the show. Now, as I had said, this feels like a lot of smaller stories happening while a larger arc is playing out. And as we get towards the finale of the main storyline, the tension certainly built, especially in the penultimate episode. But then, when we get to the end, the finale was a little underwhelming. I mean, it wasn't bad by any stretch, but it just felt a little anticlimactic given the stakes that were said to be in play. And I was so invested and been sucked in for 9 episodes. I mean, I was ready for something huge and exciting. But what we get wasn't really that. I mean, it did disappoint me some, but it's not like the end was terrible. I mean, it just concluded a portion of the story with heart and conflict. And maybe my expectations just might have been a little too high for it. Now, I think this is an easy binge, despite it being 10 episodes. The storytelling is easy but intriguing, and the characters are varied in their complexities and personalities. I loved the look of the worlds that we traveled to, and I really enjoyed the larger story that was being told, even if the finale wasn't as climactic as I'd hoped. The slightly stretched presentation did annoy me throughout, but I was able to overlook it for the sake of the story, and I'm not going to let that affect my overall score. Also, the large mix of genres was certainly enjoyable, but I do hope we get more interactions in future seasons with several of our characters. The storytelling is immersive, and sometimes the worlds are enveloping, leading to a fun watching experience. And as somebody who is completely unfamiliar with the source material, I was drawn in quickly, intent on learning as much as I could about this magical world and how it intersects with ours. I'm looking forward to more seasons to see where this story takes us with Dream of the Endless. There's sex, nudity, a lot of profanity, and a ton of violence. I give Season 1 of The Sandman 3.5 out of 5 couches. So are you a fan of the graphic novel? I'd love to hear how this series stacks up against the source material. Let me know in the comments below. But if you've not read the series, I would still really like to hear your thoughts on the show, so let me know too. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.